Welcome to Creativity, the podcast where art and engineering collide. In this podcast, we discuss our personal and creative endeavors ranging from woodworking, electronics, art, and life in general. My name is Max Maker, and this is my co-host, Jeremy S. Cook.
Hi, everyone. Our guest this week is a founding member of Tested and also the founder of FOO VR. He's a fanatic about technology, and we're thrilled to have Will Smith on our podcast today. Will, can you say hello to everybody?
Hey, everybody. Thanks for having me, guys. I'm really excited to be here. And you know, it's funny. It seems like what you guys do is what I've been doing most of my career, I guess. So it seems like a good fit.
Well, it's great having you. And I'm thrilled, just to hear your voice on this podcast.
It's funny. One of the funny things about podcasting, I've done a lot of stuff over the last 15, 20 years. But the podcasting, it turns out if you go to cities where people have big commutes, you get recognized by your voice just like standing in bars and at the grocery store talking to people and stuff. So LA and Seattle and Atlanta, it turns out I can get voice recognized, which I didn't think was a thing. So here we are. But yeah, it's great to be here, guys. Thank you all so much for having me.
So how often does it happen that somebody hears your voice and there's, oh, hey, you're Will from the podcast?
I mean, it's usually more like they look at you and it's like, did we go to high school together or something? How do I feel like I'm used to screaming at you in my car, maybe. What's this relationship? And yeah, it's happened maybe 2 or 3 times all in, but it's an odd enough thing. And I think it's completely unique to either podcasting or maybe being like an NPR host in the United States. So yeah, I guess it happens to Lakshmi Singh a lot too, but I don't know for sure. If I ever meet her, I'll have to ask.
So Will, can you tell the audience about yourself, kind of what your background is, what you're all about, I guess?
Yeah, of course. So I started out about 20 years ago now. Wow. I started writing reviews for Ars Technica, which at the time was a very small, brand new site started by a handful of Harvard Divinity students, and then I came in 3 or 4 months, I think, after they started posting every day. And worked there for a while. Ended up running Maximum PC Magazine for a pretty good chunk of time there in the early 2000s to late 2000s. And around 2010, I wanted to do something different. And so Norm and I left Maximum PC. Norman Chan, my co-host and co-founder at Tested. And we started a site called Tested, where we kind of wanted to do a little bit of what we were doing at Maximum PC in terms of how we covered technology and how we reviewed things with a very user first kind of perspective. Look, if you're buying a new phone and you're buying it at the time on a 2-year contract, then you're pretty much stuck with that phone for 2 years, whether it's good or bad. So we wanted to make sure that somebody was doing really, really top-notch phone reviews. And then we quickly realized that we wanted to expand it to things that we were interested in personally. So we started covering things like 3D printing and drones and virtual reality. I think it turns out it's a pretty common path with VR from my early exposure. At first I saw the early Oculus prototypes and like the Rift DK2 and stuff like that, and thought, oh man, this is gonna be really neat for video games. You're gonna be able to like pretend you're sitting in the cockpit of a car driving around. It's gonna feel like you're really in the car. That's awesome. Then I saw the Vive in 2015 at GDC for the first time and saw how transformative having hands in that virtual reality space is, and realized really it actually took me a while to put this together too, but realized that we were looking at not just a neat new way to play games, but actually another completely new mode of interaction for computing, for general purpose computing, for specialty computing, all sorts of stuff that went way beyond games. And that's when I started thinking about what I could use that for, and ended up kicking off FOO VR in the fall of 2015. Wow, it's been a long time.
Obviously, we got to talk a lot about FOO VR, but when you started Tested, at one point, Tested popped up on my YouTube. I guess I Googled something to do with technology, and I found you and Norm, and I thought, who are these two guys? And then I was wondering, what is Adam Savage doing here? And would you like to tell us a little bit about how that got to happen?
Yeah, so I mean, as often happens in startup land, the reason I wanted to work with Whiskey Media and the reason we launched Tested with Whiskey Media was that the people that were making Giant Bomb at the time in Comic Vine were doing something that was completely unique with content. They were taking good editorial content, really top-notch editorial content, really interesting videos that were produced in-house, and then pairing it with these massive user-generated wikis, and really engaging with the community and getting the community to do really interesting work, I thought, which was now in 2018 seems kind of old hat, but in 2008, 2009, 2010 was really, really early. As often happens with startups that are early, we ran out of money before we reached a point where we could make the money that we needed to cover our expenses, and we sold the company in a couple of chunks. Part of it went to CBS Interactive, which is where Giant Bomb and Comic Vine ended up, and then the other half went to a production company in LA called Berman Braun, which is now Whale Rock Industries. And Whale Rock had a relationship with Adam and Jamie from the Mythbusters to do their post Mythbusters, to produce post Mythbusters TV shows, websites, stuff like that. And I think the Whale Rock folks bought the half of whiskey that they bought for the technology, and then kind of they were looking at Norm and me, and then they looked at Adam and Jamie, and they looked at Norm and me, and they looked at Adam and Jamie, and they're like, So they introduced us all. Norm and I trucked over to M5 and sat down in Jamie's office and kind of were introduced to Adam and Jamie. And we had a 2 or 3 hour conversation about why we started Tested and what they wanted to get out of a website and a bunch of different stuff. And we realized that it was a pretty good fit.
Wow.
In terms of both like their commitment to users, treating the, so take a step back. When you're in web publishing, especially, you have some choices to make. You can decide, the people that are coming to my site every day and reading the site are my customers. That's how I want to make money. Or you can say, the advertisers, the people who are putting ads and putting money in our pocket are the customers. And we're going to, inevitably, you're going to focus on one or the other. And they wanted to make sure that the people who were their fans and our fans and the people that were coming to the site every day were the customers. And once we realized that we were on the same page with that, then kind of everything else came together. And it turns out the stuff that Adam especially was interested in was all stuff that we were covering peripherally already. We were going to Maker Faire. We'd been going to Maker Faire for 2 or 3 years at that point. We'd been covering people who make amazing projects. And that's what those guys, when we kind of pried it out of them, what it became clear was they were famous for blowing stuff up on TV, but both of their background was in making things. They were both prop makers, they were both effects artists, and they wanted to showcase people who were making incredible things. And Norm and I were totally down to do that, and the technology stuff was still on the table. So we were both really excited about it and kind of on board from day one. I don't know if I've ever told this story before, but the thing about Jamie's office is it has kind of all the creepy ephemera of Mythbusters that he really likes, and the ad agency stuff. So there's some really oversized baby heads, doll heads that are on his shelf behind him, which is just over his shoulder. And then there's a nude, disembodied, de-limbed torso of a body from, I think, a David, the guy from CSI Miami. Anyway, on the other side of the room. So sitting right behind Adam's shoulder as I was trying to make eye contact with him and have this really serious conversation is a naked guy's penis, fully anatomically correct, and also the body is all gouged up because it was a knifing victim or something. So it was a real weird meeting, but it all worked out well in the end.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's very similar to how when Max and I were setting up the podcast, I went to his office and he had all that weird stuff.
Just a naked guy over his shoulder the whole time?
Yeah, exactly. And
well, I was almost naked. I was in my caravan at the time when we had the first Skype discussion. I was on my own, so there was no need to put on clothes.
The beauty of the 21st century is that we can all work from anywhere on whatever clothes we want.
Yeah, we were amazed even that we were speaking on Skype. While he was in Florida and I was in Germany in the caravan.
Oh yeah, that's very cool. It's interesting having a virtual team. This is the first time I've really done that, and with FOO.
Yeah,
and it's a real challenge, right? At first you're kind of used to having everybody come into the office at 8 or 9 or 10 or whatever time you start, and then seeing everybody, doing your morning talk to see where everybody is, and then going on and going about your business. And it's been a big adjustment to a more freewheeling 3 time zone business, which is what I'm running right now.
Sure. So with FOO VR, I mean, I guess first of all, Yeah, maybe you could talk about that. Just tell us exactly what it is for those that don't know. I don't think we've.
Or
quite
maybe
gone
we
over
can
that
start
yet.
even earlier. One day in Tested, you said, I want to do this new thing.
Yeah, it's funny. It's always been for me, like every job I've quit has been the best job I've ever had up until that point, which I mean, I'm very lucky. You know, when
Yeah.
I left ours, I was I was reviewing video games and video cards and computer hardware for a living. I was like, I didn't realize that was a job you could do. When I left Maximum PC, I was in charge of what was at the time the best newsstand selling computer magazine in the United States. And like we had this fanatical readership that really loved us. When I left Tested, it was the same situation. I was getting to go and like we went to the Large Hadron Collider. They just got back from New Zealand where they were hanging out with people from Weta and all sorts of other stuff at Tested, and like passing that up is hard. You have to be willing. But the thing that I learned along the way is you have to be willing to walk away from something that's awesome if you want to make the next best thing for you.
And why VR? Why this?
So-
From all the cool technology, what is it that fascinates you about this?
So, one of the things that the benefit of age, the perspective that age gives you, is that I was able to watch for 20 years. I watched 3D acceleration happen. I watched Windows happen, really, because I started doing this as Windows 98 was kind of taking off, and the PC was starting to come into everybody's homes as a tool rather than just a novelty. The internet was a powerful force, and I reported on that. I sat on the sidelines and wrote stories. The same thing happened with mobile in 2007 when the iPhone came on the scene, and I watched all of these things happen as a guide for the uninitiated, which is great. But this time I had an idea, and I like one of the frustrations for me at Tested was that I really love games and I love people who make kind of ephemeral digital art. And it's easy for Norm and I to go to Central California or orange orchard where Mike McMasters makes Wall-E robots and R2-D2s, and like we can see the output of that 3D art where they've done all the 3D modeling to create these animatronic Wall-E robots. But like you can't do that. I couldn't do that with a video game. I can stand in front of a Wall-E robot and point at the bits and pieces, and we can talk about how he makes it. But if I wanted to do the same thing with, say, Firewatch or Gone Home or Call of Duty, you can't do that because there's really nothing more boring in the world than watching somebody stand in front of a computer monitor on video and point at the screen and talk about stuff from a computer.
Because you're probably in an office, and nobody likes offices.
Yeah, you're standing in a cube. There's 4 people around. It's fluorescent lighting. It's the least exciting video in the world. So I realized with VR we can do that, right? I realized we can take the viewer, we can take the interviewee, we can take the interviewer, and put them in a virtual world where those intangible assets in the real world are suddenly, our brains think that they're real, and we can handle them, we can touch them, we can look at them. So we did that. We threw together a kind of proof of concept starting in November of 2015 and working really intensely around the clock until the headsets launched in April of 2016. And we launched a kind of, hey, does anybody think this is cool version of the FOO show in 2016? And then people thought it was really, really interesting. Like we weren't sure there was a business there, but we figured it was worth taking a run at and seeing. And what we built with FOO is a way to record 2D or VR content on a virtual soundstage. So it works just like you would in a soundstage in LA or Burbank or wherever. But instead of being in this big physical room, we're in a big virtual room, and then we can place the actors and the sets and all that stuff virtually to create 2D or 3D content however we want.
It's really amazing. So a lot of the time, it's actually the games that the people have designed. Is that correct? A correct statement?
So that's what we do with the FOO show. The FOO show is a show about going into video games with designers or other 3D assets. The episode that we're wrapping up right now, even as we speak, is about a biomolecular chemist who makes nanomachines out of DNA. So we start there in his lab, in a virtual recreation of his lab, and then kind of powers of 10 our way down through some of his equipment into a microscopic scale all the way down until we finish the episode standing between the lipid layers of an E. coli cell.
Wow.
And we see how this phage virus turns strands of DNA into turns chunks of DNA into strands of DNA. It's very cool.
So as a viewer, I'll be in my living room with a VR goggle on. I'll be in the same room with you, and your guest and see the same things that you see. But I don't really see you. I see an avatar of yours that's animated by a computer that makes the avatar move like you moved in your room at your home.
One of the things that we realized early is that it's better to do believable animation than accurate animation when you're talking about, trying to animate a human body which has, millions of points of articulation, not millions, but dozens of points of articulation if you count the spine and the wrist and the fingers and all that stuff. It's better to fake it believably than to try to be 100% accurate. And it's funny, as VR has progressed, now we can actually be much more accurate than we could be in the beginning because we can actually track more points of data. We can track, now we use Vive track. So we use the Vive. We started out by animating the avatars using 3 points of data. So the head and the 2 hands. And then we used machine learning and IK and a bunch of other jargon that we don't really need to get into to animate the rest of the body with real mixed results. I mean, it was sometimes great, sometimes hilarious, sometimes terrible, sometimes all three at the same time.
Because it doesn't know what your feet are doing, right?
No, we have to guess based on center of gravity. And like I said, we ended up, the best success we had using the just 3 points of data was actually using a beam algorithm that we trained using actual data by taping Vive controllers to our legs and arms and then moving through the normal range of movement that you can do as a human being. And that actually produced a really believable, if occasionally hilariously janky, animation of a 2D person, a 3D person. Now we can do much better using the Vive trackers because we can track feet and hips and chest, and we can do things like lay down and sit and stuff like that. So it's a much better process now.
Very interesting. So, I mean, if I wanted to watch FOO VR and I didn't have a headset, I just had a regular computer, what would I do exactly? Would I assume there's a website? Is that correct?
Well, so it's on Steam. So with the Nano Machines episode, we're moving a 2D client that's been in beta for a while, and you can fly around just like you would in a video game. So you can watch on your 2D monitor without a VR headset using a gamepad to kind of control the camera. And you can fly around, you can interact with objects, you can pick them up and spin them around just like you can in VR using your hands. It's a little bit more awkward than, the more natural 3D interface. But it works really well. And we're quite pleased with how it's turned out.
Oh, that's really cool.
And then we also do other things. We do a lot of custom work for external parties. The interesting thing about this tool that we've built is it lets us do things like live animation incredibly. It lets us open up animations to new formats of TV. So last fall we had a call-in show on Adult Swim.
I thought this is the GameStop gig that you had.
Oh, so we did a series of commercials for GameStop. Where we injected a couple of performers into scenes from games like Destiny 2, NBA 2K18, and Shadows of Lord of the Rings: Shadows of War, the sequel to Shadows of Mordor. We also did a TV show, like a weekly TV show on Adult Swim, where we took Carl from Aqua Teen Hunger Force and gave him an NFL call-in show like you'd see on ESPN. He took calls from viewers and from experts and interviewed them and talked about what was happening in the NFL every week throughout the fall.
Oh, that's amazing. I could say I'm a big fan of that show, but I should say I watched it a long time ago. I really liked it. So yeah, that's pretty cool. I have to check that out. I guess you can see reruns of that somewhere, right?
Yeah, so it's all available on adultswim.com, I think. You can go all the way back through the whole run. It may or may not make sense if you're not following along the NFL season. I think the first 3 or 4 episodes were almost entirely about Colin Kaepernick and whether or not kneeling was okay. And Carl, he's not the most modern woke man, but I thought he had an interesting kind of take on a lot of the politics of the fall. And I don't know how political you are. I mean, we can go on. Look, I'm a middle-aged white guy. I have lots of opinions about everything.
We've got a name for these people in Germany. They're called anger citizens.
Oh, that sounds good. What is the German name, like a smashed up of the word for anger and citizens?
Yeah, Wutbürger, because they're citizens. They want to highlight that. They've got a voice and they can voice an opinion, and they're also very angry about everything.
Yes, we have a lot of that here in America right now. It's not great.
I follow the politics a lot in America, but they're also more exciting than the German ones because nothing happens here.
I mean, let's be clear. If I lived in Germany right now, I would probably find them much more exciting. Here, it's just a constant mix of rage and terror. So,
But anyway, well, I guess we should get back to VR a little bit.
We should if we want some advertisement in the future.
Yeah. So what else drew you to VR? I mean, you kind of gave us a little bit of it, but is there anything else that kind of sparked your interest in it?
yeah, I mean, the big thing for me, the thing that took me a while to kind of understand, and took a lot of me, thinking in the shower, frankly, is that the 3D interface, when you're in VR, you're using your hands to pick things up. It's the most native computer interface I've ever used for my brain, right? Like my brain,
Yes.
I was interacting with the computer in the same way that my brain interacts, that I interact with the real world every day. So if I wanted to pick something up, I could reach out and grab it with my hand. And that gives you access to more verbs, right? If in a video game design context, verbs are the things that the player can do. So the actions the player can take. So, in Call of Duty, it's running, it's jumping, it's shooting, it's reloading, and all of those things map easily to gamepad buttons or mouse and keyboard buttons. With VR and the ability suddenly to pick things up that the Vive gave you, you could grab things, you could throw them. And the easiest way to illustrate it on the radio, where I can't wave my hands around like maniac, is if you think about how you use a sword in a video game that uses a gamepad versus using a sword in a VR game where you can control the orientation of your hand. In a video game, you press the X button to swing the sword. And if the player that you're swinging at is inside the radius of attack for that and you're aimed in the right direction, then some simple math happens and you either hit the player or you don't. When you're in VR, you're holding the sword. You can hold it with your right or your left hand. You can hold it horizontally. You can hold it vertically. You can hold it so that the point is aimed at the other person. You can use it to block. You can use it to deflect things. You can set it on the ground. You can stab it into the ground. Whatever it is, whatever the game developer came up with, all of those options are theoretically available to you. And it makes both game design and just kind of user interface, user experience design a lot more both complicated and very rewarding. So I was really excited about that. It was it's like, how often do you get a chance at a blank slate on a completely new user interface for computing? I mean, it happened with mobile in the 2007, 2008, 2010. And we're still figuring it out in VR right now.
But did you have partners straight away that could help you with all the technological challenges that you were facing?
So I live in a right-to-work state, and my contract with my previous employers prohibited me from starting anything new while I was still under their employ. So no, when I posted hey, I'm quitting my job at Tested, that's the best job I've ever had, Medium post in 2015, I didn't have anybody else working for me yet. I had talked to some people, I had some advisors, I had some mentors, but I didn't have a lead dev, I didn't have a lead artist, I didn't really have a solid idea of what the product was. And it wasn't until I found Andre Infante, who's my lead dev, and Sindra Scar, who's my lead artist, that kind of it all started to come together really well.
Because that must be the biggest unknown, right? Because you're not really a programmer. Obviously, you know about technology, but it's not that you can just sit down and program something like this, right?
No, I'm dangerously incompetent on stuff like that. So yeah, let's see. I have submitted, I think, 3 things to our Git repository. Most of them were comments or notes, and one of them was an audio file. I'm not allowed to do that anymore because the risk of me messing up Git is very, very high. The thing that it was interesting. So I posted that this popped up on the R Oculus or R Vive Reddit, and I was reading the comments on that, and they're like, oh, it was really actually heartwarming to see the kind of Reddit communities for VR coming out and saying, hey, I'm really excited that Will's going to do this, blah, 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 or, alternately the occasional die in a fire Will. But way down at the bottom of that thread was a post by a guy who's like, hey, I can kind of read between the lines of what you're saying you want to do. And this thing that I was working on kind of for fun may be relevant to you. And I reached out to all the people in those threads that had, written something. I wrote back to most of the people who emailed me. And Andre sent over a demo reel of the stuff that he'd put together using a Razer Hydra. And I was like, oh, yep, nope, this is the guy. So we started talking. We got along well. And we've been working together ever since. He's really good at taking my fairly specific, maybe overly specific ideas and turning them into product.
So how many people are on your team now?
So right now we have 3 full-time people and then a handful of contractors that kind of come in and out as the jobs require more manpower.
Okay. Now, this might be a little silly, but do you ever conduct your meetings in VR? That'd be pretty cool.
Yeah,
pretty cool.
It's funny you say that. That was the first. So the scary part, there've been multiple really scary moments that happened along the way here. One is, of course, quitting your job to start a company with no team and only a vague idea of what the product is. The other was actually that first interview, and I knew that we like. One of the things that we realized really early on is that body language comes through really well in the world that we've built. So like, when you're using Skype, you kind of miss a lot of the subtle body language cues that most people have in conversation. So, if you want to interrupt somebody, then you sometimes put your hand out or you point a finger at something or you kind of make a hand gesture that signals to the other person subconsciously, hey, he has something to say. I should be quiet now for a sec. Or when you shrug, when you kind of tilt your head to the side, a lot of that stuff gets lost on video conferencing, but it comes through in VR. And we'd been doing our stand-up meetings by the time we recorded the Firewatch episode for 5 months almost. It was the only way I didn't know. I only knew Andre from VR for a year, more or less. And when I met him in person, his body language came through flawlessly. I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, my brain knows you, even though I've never actually seen what you look like in person. The interesting thing is that I kind of never paid attention to how long it takes people to adjust to that. So when we sat down to record with the Campo Santo guys, the Firewatch episode, I wasn't sure if it was like a 3 or 4 minute onboarding process or if it was going to take them the entirety of the time we had to kind of get VR legs. And if I could, like, I didn't know if the medium gave me enough information to actually do an interview with someone. And there wasn't really a way to test that beforehand. So we just kind of went in and I was sitting there as I was putting the headset on. I was like, man, I hope this thing that I spent the last 6 months on and a ton of money actually works. That would be really good. Luckily it did. And the interview worked really well. And the interesting side effect of how well it works is that when you're wearing the headset and you're in the space with me and whoever I'm interviewing, you really feel like you're there. You feel like a fly on the wall, to the point that like the avatars make eye contact with you if you get into their field of view and stuff like that.
Oh, so if you would do this live, you couldn't, you wouldn't enable all your viewers, right? Because then you had a huge crowd in front of you.
There are a bunch of different ways to do that. I think the way that AltSpace does it or did it works really well, where most people in that world are ghosts. So you're in the live recording, you see what's happening live, but you can't interact in a meaningful way with the people who are the subjects, unless you get flagged to answer a question or something like that, ask a question or something like that.
That's really cool. It's a whole new medium, getting people together to discuss stuff that aren't really in the same room.
It's very much a new way to kind of interact. It's funny. It's much closer to, say, interactive theater or something like Sleep No More, or like going to a live taping of a game show or a talk show or something like that, than say, watching a show on TV. It's even at its least interactive, it's much more engaging than watching a non-interactive video on your phone or on your TV or something like that.
That's why it's called virtual reality.
Well, and the other side of that is that, if you're going to take over people's 2 favorite senses and their sight and their hearing entirely, you have to really work to engage them. Like that's on you, the VR content creator, to make something that's compelling and interesting enough that people will leave the headset on for the 20 minutes of 30 minutes of the show and not, slide it up in their forehead to check their phone or look at Twitter or Facebook or whatever.
So with the VR environment, you can see, everywhere in this studio, correct? So not just you and the person you're interviewing. That's a fair statement, correct?
I don't know that I understand the question.
Well,
actually,
I guess what I'm thinking is, I'm looking at you interviewing the person. You ever put like a Easter egg in the side? I mean, maybe you wouldn't want to tell me that, but what if there's like a little TV or something in the side that if you're like, well, I'll look over and see what's going on, and you know what I'm saying? Or maybe
how detailed is the virtual recording studio?
So it's interesting you ask that. So we have definitely built stuff that's only visible to the host or the person being interviewed. For example, I have cue cards that I can stack questions on, so that I have, because it's helpful to have prompts when you're in the headset. And if I take the headset off midway through an interview, then my avatar gets really weird looking and crumples up onto the floor. So we built in engine tools for cue cards and teleprompters and sending notes from the production team and stuff like that. Let's see. Cool. We built a really fully featured drone style. Well, I mean, there's multiple models for the camera, but for the Adult Swim show, they needed real camera models. So we have like a dolly camera, we have a boom camera, we have a drone camera that you can kind of just fly around wherever you want. It's funny because we thought about actually just building. There's no reason we couldn't put a Vive tracker on like a shoulder-mounted camera rig, and also just have a camera person walking around the virtual set with a virtual camera that behaves exactly like a shoulder-mounted camera would. We haven't done that yet, but I think I kind of want to, just because it seems like it'd be really silly and give a lot of opportunity.
It sounds silly, yes. Stuff. It sounds very silly.
I mean, it sounds like a good user interface to me, but maybe I guess I'm in the minority here, so I don't know.
But I mean, that was the thing we got to, is that it was much easier to mimic a drone interface for the cameras. We started having to figure this out when we did the first pilot for Adult Swim last January, and like it was much easier to just build a drone camera, an interface that mimicked the drone camera, than try to create a new interface from scratch that's bespoke for this VR thing, because there's a million drone camera operators in the world, and there would only be the person that we trained to run this weird, VR camera interface. So, you can, and the nice thing is the RC controls for a drone camera basically are easily mapped to an Xbox 360 or PlayStation controller or whatever gamepad you want to use.
So do you see, I mean, besides Adult Swim, obviously you've kind of done that, but do you see other people trying to license your technology in the future, or have you been contacted about that?
So yeah, we did a lot of custom projects last year. One of the reasons we're slow delivering new episodes of the FOO show is that we sell literally hundreds of copies of those episodes, aside from what we had in Kickstarter backers when we post them on Steam. So they're not like massive revenue generators, and they won't support us in and of themselves. But we did a bunch of pilots last year for different studios, and have a pretty deep pipeline of work for 2018 stacked up right now.
Anything you want to preview to us or announce what we should be looking forward to this year?
I would love to, but I am unfortunately not authorized to release that information. They are not my projects to announce. So, sure. But we will talk about them on. I talk about them on Twitter if and when they reach a point that we can talk about them. So people can follow me at Will Smith on Twitter, and I'm happy to share that stuff as it comes up.
Very good.
I heard a rumor you were doing a remake of Lawnmower Man. Is that correct?
I love Lawnmower Man, but probably I love Lawnmower Man because I don't think I've seen it since it came out in 1991. If I were remaking anything, it would be Hackers, because I think Hackers is an underappreciated classic. But unfortunately, I think the rights for that are a little bit outside my price range right now.
Yeah, I don't know that I've ever actually seen it. I just remember hearing about how how it was such a realistic view of virtual reality, right? Is that correct?
Yeah, so I want to say Lawnmower Man is kind of like Flowers for Algernon meets The Matrix, because there's VR and they use it to make it's an odd film. I don't know, like it has the benefit of really, really terrible mid-90s CG. That may or may not have been hand drawn. Like, I don't know if it's hand drawn animation or if they actually did CG, but it's pretty rough.
That's what I'm always amazed about. How did these movies in the 90s do their special effects?
Oh,
it's difficult enough for my computer to render just a standard video. And they do the stuff like they did in Speed, where they jumped with the bus over the gap of the highway, the closed-off highway.
Oh, over the gap?
Yeah, over the gap. I'm like, how did they make this?
They just digitally removed the ground, right?
Yeah, but what software do we even use? Was Photoshop out back then?
Oh, I'm sure they did it individually by hand. Yeah, like each frame by hand. The one I like to think about is Jurassic Park, because they did that. ILM did that in 1990. I mean, that movie came out in the summer of 93, so that means it would have been... post-production work would have been going for 2 years beforehand, probably, on the dinosaurs. And I mean, that CG has held up incredibly well, even 20 years later.
Yeah, that was an amazing movie. That being said, where do you see VR going? I mean, do you think in 20 years we'll be using VR headsets exclusively, or do you think they'll still be movies as we see them today?
Oh, I mean, look, as with anything, you use the right tool for the project that you're working on, right? So if you are the places that I think VR is going to make the fastest impact is in anything that requires 3D content creation. So if you look at what people are doing with tools, even the rudimentary tools like Tilt Brush and Medium and Google's Blocks, having a 3D creation interface that doesn't require the 4-pane CAD interface that we're all familiar with, where you look at the X, Y, Y, Z, X, Y, X, Z, Y, Z, and then the preview, and trying to convert that in your brain into a 3D object that you can manipulate using those panes. And then, it requires mental gymnastics that most people are bad at.
It's just funny. I do remember, I worked as a mechanical engineer for quite some time. And I remember, talking to my boss is like, yeah, this does this is this, trying to illustrate to this to somebody. She's like, well, in these presentations, some people can't see that in 3D. And it just kind of blew my mind because I was so used to it. But I guess you're right. Absolutely right. With, a lot of people, until you're really used to drawing something out on a CAD system, it's not how we're wired to think, I guess. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean that's exactly it. Like I can use SketchUp or Rhino or CAD or AutoCAD, whatever, to do straight edge stuff. But if you want me to do some soft edge, if you want me to make a monster mask, I can do that with clay all day long. Mm-hmm. But if I have to do it in a computer interface, it's going to be torture because I can't.
Super difficult.
Yeah, it's really, really hard. It's why those people who do that get paid so much money and are so good at their jobs, is because it's a really hard skill. And VR makes that much more accessible even today, because you can build your thing, you can rough it out in Medium and then export an STL into whatever your ZBrush or whatever your modeling program of choice is. And I think we'll see more stuff like that before we see anything else. And then, if the pixel density on the headsets gets high enough to do desktop type work with text and things like that, then even that will continue to, we'll see people using, your typical Steam, Cyberpunk VR computer interfaces for Windows and stuff like that, maybe at some point. But before that, we'll see VR ZBrush and things like that. My favorite example of that thing you mentioned, Jeremy, is that I have a friend who's a furniture designer for a big retail chain in the US. And she does most of her work on sketch. Like, she does sketches, and then she hands off the sketches to the engineers, and the engineers build the furniture, and then she goes back and works with them to refine it into what she wants. And when I showed her Tilt Brush the first time, she just went completely bonkers. Like, she spent an hour and a half drawing 2 rooms worth of furniture, because she's like, look, I can make 3D versions of these things that have been in my head that I've never been able to show people before, or I've had to draw, you do a bunch of 2D sketches and then hope that the translation from 2D object to 3D object works the way that you wanted. So it's incredibly freeing. And I think, that's where the early promise of VR is, I think.
That's awesome. Yeah, I guess I always envisioned it as more of a entertainment medium, but you see it more as a tool for creation. I think until the cost. I think until the cost of access comes down to the point that you can buy a headset for a couple $100 that's a standalone device. I think we'll see pro use more, and then the consumer stuff will follow. I mean, we're Oculus has their Go standalone 3DOF hardware coming out this year. We're going to see some more standalone hardware later this year or early next, I think, and yeah, I think we'll know more what the consumer market looks like in 2 years.
I'm spending a lot of time on caravanning exhibitions, which I don't really like doing, and some exhibitions they had VR headsets so you could stand inside a caravan and see it, which was a bit pointless because you can just go into the real caravan that's right next to it. But nonetheless, if you put on that headset, you really think you are in that caravan. And I think that's really going to inspire all the other vendors to do the same thing for next year. So I'm going to see if there will be many more VR headsets around, because I've counted maybe 4 or 5, and there was always a line, and people were fascinated, absolutely fascinated.
One of the things that I had pitched last year that I can talk about is a medtech company. So a company that makes laboratory diagnostic machines. You can put a sample in, it does some crazy biochemistry stuff on it, and then it spits out a result like 45 minutes later or 2 days later or whatever. And, the power of VR is that we can show things that are either intangible in the real world or that we need to accelerate time in a way that they don't work. So instead of schlepping a bunch of $1 million machines to trade shows around the country and world, we had talked about building VR versions of these devices that we could, start out, show them how the control panel works, show them all the stuff that the people are going to need to know to operate the machine, but then also shrink them down inside the machine and let them see what's happening inside, all the way down to the biomolecular level. And I think that's the kind of stuff that we'll see in the kind of second wave of VR.
And people can actually use the machines without destroying them. Here in Germany,
exactly.
we sell a lot of lathes and CNC machines and stuff like that. You can't let somebody operate your CNC at the booth. But in VR, you can just let them press buttons as long as they want.
Well, listen, Will, we've asked you all about VR and the stuff that's, kind of in your realm. But, I feel like Max and I, we play with tools a lot. I'm sure you do too. So what is your favorite tool? We need to know.
Well, okay, so this is there's multiple facets to this question, I guess. You
sound like Adam Savage.
Well, I'm not the technical. I'm not a technical founder. I'm not the person out writing code, so I'm not going to give you like a IDE or anything like that. Slack is a thing that without Slack, I wouldn't have a business right now, right? Like we use Slack, my lead devs in New Mexico, my artists in Norway, and Slack lets us communicate, and our freelancers are all over the world. Slack lets us communicate across time zones and share files and all the things that would have been nightmare 1,000 long email threads just live in their own little room in Slack, and it's an incredibly powerful tool. My favorite real world tool, I have a tested fan years ago made this amazing wooden mallet that's like a 10-pound mallet. I'm gonna reach over and grab it. He said this is what I use for a convincer, and it's like 3 pieces of wood that are joined together really beautifully. And it is my all-time favorite hammer. Like I have a bunch of hammers, but this one's, and it's actually not a 10-pound. It's probably about a 4-pound, but it's it's great. You can use it to whack, and since it's made of wood, you can whack on wood with it as long as the wood is softer than it or harder than it, and you don't like damage the face of your whatever you're hitting with it, which is great. So, and then like my phone, I don't know, the phone gives me the freedom to both work horribly, like all the time in a way that's really unhealthy, but also to go and do awesome stuff and like hang out with my kid during the day when I don't have a busy day, and like not worry that I'm going to miss something important or that somebody else is going to be waiting for me. So, I am very much a fan.
Sure. Yeah, it's amazing how, you go back to that hammer. It's amazing how something so simple as that, if it's really well made, can be just amazing. It's, I don't know, kind of neat.
Well, and it's
hammers are nice, and they've got a history. They've had them for 10,000s of years.
I mean, we turned a rock into a hammer, right?
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, it's the tool.
Exactly.
That's true. I mean, they don't say if all you have is a wrench, everything looks like a bolt.
Everything looks like a bolt head. Well, and the thing about the wooden one specifically is that it's this gorgeous thing. It's pretty dinged up because I use it a lot. But because it's like, I would never buy a wooden mallet like this, and because somebody sent me this thing, I've like, oh, this is an incredibly useful tool. So anyway,
good answer. Good enough.
Yeah, very good. Good answer.
Yeah, we appreciate it. Good hammer. So that leads us to our last section, which is progress. So this is where we talk about what we've been doing this week. Some viewers or listeners might not know, Jeremy and I, we actually are makers. We make YouTube videos of building stuff. We build projects. So this is normally a chance where we talk about what we've been doing this week, what progress we have made or whatnot, because sometimes things go wrong. So Will, what have you been doing this week?
So this week we're coming up on tax season now in the United States. So I have spent the last 5 days going through every expenditure from 2017 that I didn't codify in QuickBooks and I'm coding all of my spending for 2017, which is both incredibly depressing and really, really boring. And I'll be honest, it makes me really regret getting a 10 keyless mechanical keyboard because I don't have a numpad, which it turns out would be really useful. So I'm probably going to order a numpad from Amazon as soon as we get off the phone here. That might be my answer next time I talk to you guys.
Are you using an iMac?
No, I'm a VR. I'm a Windows guy. So
Okay.
yeah, you got to. There's no Mac or really even Linux development for VR. At least
Because I have the numpad and I really don't like it. Because my mouse is too far away now. It's too wide for me. I need to change it.
Well, so I bought a Logitech mechanical 10 keyless keyboard when my last one conked out, and I love it because the mouse is really close. But yeah, when I need to type numbers, there's nothing more terrible than typing a whole bunch of numbers on that top row of keys where it takes forever to type each one. So that is my incredibly boring answer. I also flew kites with my daughter at about 7 o'clock yesterday morning.
That's nice.
So that was very exciting.
Flying kites is one of the little joys in life, you know?
Look, if you haven't flown a kite recently, you should go out and fly a kite. It's highly recommended.
Yeah, it's great. It really is.
It's true. I haven't done that in a while. So
well, and you've got kids, so
yeah, that's all. Well, they're just old enough to start flying them, I guess. So I can.
Yeah, well,
start
that's
doing that.
the thing with kids. You buy them toys that they're not ready for yet.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
my son's 4 years old, so I assume he's ready for a PlayStation 4, right? Is that the consensus with you guys?
Let's see. My daughter just beat Mario Odyssey a few weeks ago. I would say, yeah, like it'll be frustrating at first, and then he'll ramp up to it and get excited about it. The fiber's not holding up. Sorry, guys.
That's all right.
So, Jeremy, what have you been up to?
I guess one thing that I did, I bought this Strand Beast kit from a while ago. I was like, I should probably put it together since I made like 5 of these on my own. I should probably actually try the kit. And I put it together. It took me about an hour, and I was really impressed with how well it was built for mass manufacturing and just like, I don't want to say normal people, but just like somebody could put it together, for something that cost, like $5 on eBay. It was just a pretty amazing design. So it was.
Oh wow!
That
Did
was
it
fun
work?
to build. Yeah, it worked really well. I had the fan on it and stuff, and so I took video of it. So hopefully it'll be interesting. At the end, I have it kind of crash off the end of my bench table, and should be a fun little episode, I guess.
Should take it to the beach. That's his natural habitat.
Yeah, I could just like leave it there, or have it walk down the causeway or something.
Yeah, I wonder how this guy that builds the real strand bees transports them, because they don't look like you could just put them on a lorry or something and ship them away.
I don't know. Maybe he lives there. I mean, it seems like where he tests them out isn't like isn't like Miami or something. It's like somewhere that a rural beach, if there is such a thing, I guess.
Yeah, that's true. I think is it Holland? Who knows?
I think it's Dutch. So yeah, I guess that's Holland, right? Dutch.
Oh yeah, we call Holland. It's the
Netherlands.
Yeah, you're right. The Netherlands. Anyway, yeah.
So Max, what have you been working on this week?
Oh, I've been editing a lot the upcoming video of the hydrofoil, the electric hydrofoil I'm building. So it's a surfboard with a 7,000 watt motor and a wing underneath. So you're flying through the water or above the water. It's a mix of surfing and flying, I guess. And yeah, I just built a board and now I'm editing the video for that. So it's all the fiberglassing and CNC cutting of the foam. And that's going to be out very soon. So stay tuned for that.
So,
you, Jeremy?
Well, I wanted to ask you first. Was there any 3D printing in your build?
There was, yeah. I had to push down some fiberglass. It wouldn't stay down in this cavity. So since I had a 3D model, I printed some molds almost that I could press into that cavity, so the fiberglass would stick to the foam. So yeah, that's a really good use for the 3D printer.
Only reason I asked,
I had the files.
The reason I asked that in this case is Max revealed last week that or a couple weeks ago, that he films his entire 3D print in 4K and then cuts it down to like 2 seconds. Is that correct?
I did do it this time, no. Yeah, Laura Kampf told me it's a bad idea, so I thought maybe she knows 1 or 2 things about video editing.
Yeah, well, your videos always come out quite nicely. But,
yeah, it just takes a long time.
It takes a long time.
Max, can I ask you a question about your project? So, are you familiar with the air chair?
Oh yeah,
It's a
yeah.
yeah, it's a hydrofoil sit-on board from the 90s.
All I heard is very
that some friends of
dangerous.
mine- you could hurt yourself, but I had friends who had one when I was in high school and became pretty proficient on it. But you were always riding right on the edge of control and incredible painful impacts with the water with that thing. Have you ever tried one?
Nope.
And so so the biggest challenge with that thing is keeping the foil all the way in the water, right? Like you're fine coming up and going down, but the moment the foil would skip on the surface of the water, you were at instant risk of catching that front edge and just like doing a 90-degree rotation in a split second.
Mm-hmm.
Which was where you would hurt yourself.
Yeah. I guess with the hydrofoil that I'm building, there's a motor above the wing. So first the motor will get out of the water and hopefully it will slow me down. But yeah, lots of people in the community, we've got this great forum, efoil.builders, and people share their tips and tricks on how to build a hydrofoil because it's a new thing. And they all said it's pretty dangerous and they hope they never crash and collide with the wing because it's very sharp and the mast is very sharp. So I'm a bit frightened.
So the air chair, it had foot straps, and you kind of buckled into this seat post seat thing.
Yeah.
It was really I grew up I was a wakeboarder when wakeboards were fiberglass things that were like surfboards with straps, and like it was really, the air chair was really, really fun, but it always felt a little more dangerous than anything else we did. So I can't wait to see your video on this.
Which is surprising because you're strapped to it, so you can't really hit the air chair with your own body.
So it wasn't about hitting the air chair, it was the way it whipped you around on impact. Like you would get whiplash from hitting the water because when I say you would go from being vertical to horizontal in a split second, I really mean like incredibly, incredibly fast. Whatever the speed of the boat is turned into angular velocity was I mean, the nice thing about it was you only had to go about 15 miles an hour, so you weren't hitting that hard, but yeah, it was a really fun, weird thing. You could really, really fly, like really, really soar with that, and some of the kids would eventually end up doing like flips and helicopters and stuff on it, which seemed really scary.
Oh yeah, I guess we have the advantage that we're not strapped to the board, so if we fall, we can fall off. But if you fall in front of the board will be really light but still have speed, so it gets a lot of lift, so it actually lifts the wing out of the water and then hit you with the wing instead of the board.
What's the is it like a jet? Is like an impeller motor, or is it a
No, it's a propeller. I'm building a propeller, so I'm building jets, but the propeller has a duct around it, so you can't get your fingers or your feet in it.
That's good. Well, I can't wait to see this video, Max.
Yeah, and I'm going to wear full protective wear. Yeah.
I was going to say, are you going to wear like full wetsuit and the whole thing?
Yeah, full wetsuit, doesn't matter how warm it is, and a helmet and a vest and gloves and shoes, everything. Whatever I can get, I'll wear it. Because I'm pretty frightened. Like, these edges of the mask is so sharp, it's almost like a knife.
I wouldn't think that they'd have to be that sharp. The ones on the chair were just basically sheet metal they weren't sharpened. They were just flat, and that was enough. Like it wasn't, you weren't bernouilliing really, other than using the angle of attack on the blade, as I recall.
Yeah, but you're being pulled by a boat with gasoline, and we just have lithium-ion batteries, and that tiny motor with 7,000 watts, which is a lot, but we really have to fight for efficiency here.
That's interesting. I'm fascinated by this. You have to share the video with me when you post it. I can't wait to see it in action.
Oh, I will, and I invite Norm to come over and try it out, because I've seen he posted a video last week where he rode a tiny boat.
I'm so jealous of those tiny boats. I want to build one. I didn't like the fact that they use zip ties on those things to do the curving of the wood is amazing to me. I thought that was really cool.
Yeah. And that was my inspiration to do this hydrofoil, I guess, ultimately, because there's this company, Chesapeake Boat Parts or whatever they're called. They're selling stitch and glue kits for all kinds of boats, big boats, small boats, and they had this one boat called the Cocktail Class Racer, and it's just 1.2 meters long, so that's like, I don't know, like half a person long, basically.
1.2 would be like 5 feet and change, basically.
5 feet, yeah, 5 feet. So it's really, really small. And I thought, man, I could build this. But I thought, no, I want to build my own thing. And then ultimately it ended up with this hydrofoil thing.
Very cool.
So
Nice. Well,
Stitch
hopefully
and
that
Glue
all
is really
turns out
interesting.
well.
Hopefully you survive, Max.
Something for you to build, Jeremy. Yeah. I'll make sure this will be edited if I don't and upload it. Yeah, I guess that's it for the week. And, thank you very much for having you. It's been a thrill to talk to you, just to hear your voice on this podcast, because it feels like I'm on a different podcast.
Well, thank you guys for having me. This has been a lot of fun. It's always fun to come in and spread the word about VR. I know, it's a market that has had the kind of start that most people expected. A little bit of a slow start. It's expensive and it's different, and it changes things the way you think about computers. But it's something I remain really excited about, and as a tool for creators, I think it's incredible. So thank you all for having me, and keep up the good work. I really enjoyed the show.
Yeah, thanks so much for coming on. We really, really appreciate it.
Good luck with your company, obviously. And one last tip from you. What if people want to experience FOO VR in its best and full quality? What do they have to get?
I mean, I recommend the Vive. There's a new high-end Vive coming out very soon now in the first quarter of 2018. I don't know that you necessarily need that. I think if you're more budget conscious, you can get the lower end version. But if you want to try the FOO Show, you don't even have to have a VR headset. You can just go to Steam, search for FOO Show, and we come up. We have 4 episodes in the store right now. You can try the Firewatch episode for free, and if you like it, then there's 3 more that'll be there that you can check out. And all you need is a gamepad and a computer that can run the most basic of video games. So
awesome.
Very neat.
Great.
Now, what about you, Max? Where can we find you?
You can find me on Twitter on Max_Maker_YT, and on Instagram, MaxMaker as well. And of course on YouTube, it's called Max Maker.
Very cool. And if you want to find me, I'm at Jeremy S. Cook on Twitter. And on YouTube, I'm also Jeremy S. Cook. So it should be easy enough to find.
Awesome.
Cool. So, all right. Well, thanks so much. And I guess we'll talk to you later.
Thanks, guys.
Best of luck. Bye-bye.